All right, everybody, I'm at Infocom in Orlando. It's 2025, if you weren't paying attention out there. And I've got two of the probably smartest guys in the world of, well, I mean, we can't even say this is, projection. This is LCD market, but command and control. I mean, you all are really spread out through a lot of different verticals. But we've got the team from Barco here to talk about UniSee and the LCD walls. So let's get right into it. First off, gentlemen, introduce yourselves. Tell the audience who you are and what you do.
First of all, Nick, thank you very much for having us here. JB&A has been a great partner of ours over the years, so thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
My name is Dan Gundry. I'm our Director of Global Strategic Business Development. It's my job to find our ecosystem partners, manage our alliance partners, manage some of our distribution friends as well. So thank you.
All right. Good morning. Thank you from my side. I'll talk a little bit slower. So my name is Gerrit Vermeer. I run R&D and product management for display side at Barco.
Perfect. All right, so let's get right into UniSee. So I got a bunch of questions I want us to talk through, so don't mind my notes here. But let's first talk about UniSee II. What are the big improvements over previous generations and over other LCD walls that customers might be looking at? Who wants that?
All right. I will take that one. So actually UniSee II, we launched more than a year ago. And actually from a technology side of a point of view, it introduces quite some technology innovations in it. So it uses quantum dot technology for colors. It uses a mini LED active matrix chip-on-glass backlight unit. I'll come back to that one. And it has a very advanced polarizer. Now, all these things are needed for image quality, for ergonomics, and actually also for power consumption. So if I look a bit at the color gamut of this LCD, is nowhere comparable with other LCD video walls. It's actually very close to direct view LED. So it's DCI-P3 to be a bit technical. The mini LED backlight unit, we go from 200 LEDs in the backlight of a normal tile LCD to 6,000, which allows us to dim, which means you go to HDR contrast. So that's what you get via this. The other thing is, of course, due to this mini LED backlight unit, you drive it in a different way. It's active matrix, so ergonomics, you don't get a scanning behavior on this LCD screen that you get with other LCD screens. And the last thing is maybe due to this very fine granularity dimming we can do to boost the contrast, the overall power consumption goes down, and hence also the heat radiation goes down. So maybe in summary, you could say it's actually the image quality of direct view LED, except for the seams, of course. It gives you the ergonomics of rear projection, actually, which is probably still the best ergonomical wise, but at the price of an LCD video wall. So that's maybe the simplest way to position a bit UniSee II, how it's different versus the former UniSees and versus plain vanilla LCD video walls.
So it's interesting that you mentioned the similarities to LED. And, first one is the more capable you make it with HDR, with localized dimming, also makes it more efficient. So it's interesting that those two are very synonymous with each other because we're cutting power, but we're also beautifying the product, right? So the first one. But let's talk about the alternative to LED. So you mentioned seams there for a minute, and it sort of reminds me that the more we think about LED in terms of pixel pitch, the more we think about distances, and the seam kind of has the same objective. The farther away you are, the smaller the seam is to the point where it disappears. Is this something people should be considering as an alternative to an LED environment? And what are the pros to doing that?
Yeah, so this is an alternative to LED. Quite frankly, in the corporate space, when the conversation starts at LED, a lot of times it will end up at UniSee for all the reasons you mentioned and more, Nick. So for instance, the actual pixel pitch on this is about 0.6 millimeters, right? So just to kind of put it into that LED terminology, right? We both already talked about the power consumption aspect of this. So if you're talking about retrofit locations, you also can extend power with this too. So retrofit applications makes total sense. We already talked about ergonomics with this too. So serviceability, much different with this versus say an LED where you may have to roll a truck, bring an integrator out there. You're gonna have this. And then also when you talk about total cost of ownership, going back to that conversation of conversations that started LED, do come back to this. The factor of difference between LED and UniSee is also really important to take into consideration. And we can show you the 10-year TCO of an LED wall at different pixel pitches versus UniSee in order to help customers make those decisions from both a operational, functional perspective, but then also from a cost perspective.
That's interesting. And I think pixel pitch is an interesting one because oftentimes people look at a wall and they don't consider how big that palette is because they're driven by the price based on what that pixel pitch will give them, either a high pitch or a low pitch, right? And that defines the actual size palette. One of my fascinations with LCD is we know what our space is going to be. Every tile we add is another 1K of pixels. We can absolutely guarantee what we're going to be able to deliver on a wall, which you can't get with LED until you've defined exactly what pixel, exactly how many cabinets. Then you might end up with a resolution that is hard to work with, that you're having to format your data. And with an LCD wall like UniSee, we've got a fixed resolution always and more flexibility without having external processors. Is that some of the core conversations that drive people back to this over an LED wall?
I think it's part of it, right? There's all these other considerations that we talked about. Resolution comes into play for sure. We talked about serviceability comes into play for sure. You mentioned something earlier too, talking about seams. Seams is usually one of the questions why people say, I want LED because it's seamless. They are still modules. And over the lifespan of that wall, depending upon the manufacturer of that wall, you will see the seams. So that is something to consider when you're talking about LED. It's truly not seamless. Per se. And the one thing I'll say is about this in a corporate or a boardroom type application, the seams do fade away. Your eyes don't see the seams over time, the more that you're in there using those spaces. So seems to me is not the biggest argument for LED versus LCD. I think those other arguments we had about heat dissipation, power, longevity, total cost of ownership, resolution, serviceability are really the reasons why this should be something you're thinking about if you're thinking about LED, whether that's in a mission critical application like a control room, or whether it's in a business critical application like a lobby, like a boardroom, digital signage type applications, even in the broadcast world, which is that mission critical world as well.
You know, it's interesting that you hit the 0.6 millimeter, and I'll come right over to you, is that this is far more affordable than a 0.5 or a 0.6 or even a 0.9 LED wall. So you're getting the high pixel ratio, the very dense palette to work with, a very high resolution wall at a price that you could never get inside of LED, right?
That's actually the point I wanted to add, meaning where LCD is jiving in. Now, first of all, if you look worldwide, all applications, LCD is still the most deployed technology in number of square meters, number of installations. Main reason, price, very clear. And then your question about when does it jive in? We see, for Barco, control rooms is a very important market, so we deploy this a lot in control rooms. By the way, we do 2 installations a day of this technology already we started with UniSee 7 years ago. So that's a bit the rate we do. But now we see in signage applications that it all depends on the viewing distance. So where we are sitting here, you can easily read, look at an image, do an Excel even, you can do whatever you want. If you want to have the same with LED, you need to go to 0.5 because there is the fill factor that also plays a factor in the way you can read it. And then, of course, the price difference is a factor 4, 5, as we speak today. Of course, the LED is coming down, but it's not at all at the level LCD will be. So we see a lot of applications, especially for UniSee II, with that image quality, for signage applications with nearby viewing distance, or broadcast with nearby viewing distance, because LED is just too expensive. And a factor of 4 or 5 is not, we don't talk about 20%. So that's probably one of the key reasons why it has a very sweet spot compared to LED, which probably will disappear in 4 or 5 years from now when the 0.5 becomes affordable, if I can say it like this.
Okay, now you mentioned something really interesting back there about seams in an LED wall. And oftentimes what we see is that's driven by the mounting infrastructure, right? What's holding that to the wall either flexes over time or people build it out of wood. This has got a very unique mounting structure to it. Let's talk about that for a minute because there are partnerships with folks like AMD that you mentioned and others that can develop hardware around this, but you've developed your own mounting brackets as well to make this clean, seamless, flexible. So let's dive in on that a little bit, Dan.
Yeah, let me comment a bit. So it was launched 7 years ago. It's a completely different way of mounting. Now let's even take one step back. If you look at direct view LED, if you look at the rear projection, the mount is inherently part of the solution of the video wall. And for LCD, it isn't. Why? Because it came out of consumer. It came out of standalone TVs. And then you have mounting companies who were applying mounting structures. That's all fine, unless you start reducing your seam. If you come then to a level which is becoming sub 1 millimeter, which this one is more or less, we thought there's only one way, that we also offer the mount. Because otherwise we can point to the mounting suppliers, but that doesn't help. So we designed our own mount. Was designed in Germany, so German quality and accuracy. And due to the mount, there are a few elements which are very important. It's different, so we had to train a lot of resellers in the first 2-3 years. But once you got the training, you know how to do that. And the difference is, you first install the mount realigns itself, and only when this is done, you hang on your monitors. You don't need to do any alignment anymore afterwards. So that's already a big difference. It's a self-aligning system. So, I mean, once you installed it, you have seen it slides to each other and it keeps itself aligned. And number 3, as important, it's okay to have a small seam, but the seam needs to be uniform over every row, every column. It's better to have a 10% wider seam if it's stable and uniform than the other way around. So we thought there is no other way. Of course, we had some barrier to cross ecosystem-wise and some training to be done. But we don't sell it without the mount, with a few minor exceptions. And I think that's the strength of it, because it's also hard to copy. Because copying mechanics, it's all in the tolerances. It's not in the construction itself. So that's why the brand name survives for more than 6 years, actually, 7 years, sorry.
I just want to add a little bit of context to that, Nick, if I could. So again, we talked about the fact that Barco designs, manufactures product for mission critical and business critical applications. So you talked about the tolerances. When you're talking about the seams that way, it's really glass against glass. So when you're talking about independent mounts that are not unitized together as UniSee is, when you talk about independent mounts, over time, they're going to shift independently, and that glass is going to that potential is there, that risk is there for them to hit against each other, butt up against each other. And because that's glass against glass with no mullion or bezel around the outside of it, potential is there for breakage. Okay. And in mission critical as well, when you have operators that are looking at that wall, the seams do matter there too. The alignment matters because it's a distraction if it's not. Just like the color and the brightness, if they're off, the operators pick up on that and it distracts them from doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is, protecting us, protecting our environments, monitoring traffic, government command and control, whatever that application is. So I think that's just a context to why we've engineered it the way we've engineered it.
Phenomenal. Listen, guys, I really appreciate you being here. I love that you loaned me this wall so we could show it off this week. We're really pushing to show how this fits in a corporate environment as well as in a broadcast environment. What is that missing link that you want people to know and sort of take away? And especially for the dealers, what should they be thinking about as an alternative to LED and considering this platform?
As far as I'm concerned, I think LCD in general has a gap on image quality, which actually UniSee II closed. So I think the pure image quality from color, from contrast, from viewing angle is actually closed. So should not be a reason not to use LCD anymore. And then, of course, there are the seams. We talked about it. Depends on the use case, depends on the viewing distance, depends on the content you show. And that will dictate if you can work with the UniSee II and meet your budget requirements, or you have to go for an LED. But then, of course, if the viewing distance is 1.5, 2 meters, personally, I think LED is still too expensive, and you better choose for this solution.
And your second part of your question was, what should resellers and integrators know? I think it's an education component. This industry we're at, right? Infocom wants to talk about LED, and that's fine because that is the future technology that's here today. But do not dismiss the right kind of best-in-class LCD. LCD has gotten that bad rap because of the baseline LCD manufacturers that are out there and the dismissal of it in lieu of LED. But the right LCD product can still be the right piece for your application. So don't dismiss it. Reach out to the experts at JB&A, reach out to the experts at Barco. We can help you make those decisions on both the quality, the operations, the feature sets, and that 10-year total cost of ownership.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you both being here. Hey, listen, this has been another exciting InfoComm. We're in Orlando. It's 2025. If you weren't here, watch this video over again and find out more about UniSee. Hit up your sales team at JB&A or talk to Dan and team over at Barco so you can learn more about UniSee and how to offer it to your clients. We're over and we're out.